Ha! I got you there. You thought that we're finished, right? No, we're not. Welcome to our webinar. It's another Thursday, so it's time to have a little bit of fun with 3ds Max. So where do we really start? Where's the the welcoming thing? You can see that today we're going to be working with one of our students' scene. So we've got this scene from Paulina. So Paulina, thank you for sharing your marvelous work with us. Once again, for those of you that just joined in and are first time with us, my name is Michael and I'm a teacher for VizAcademy. VizAcademy is a rendering school that will teach you how to create beautiful photorealistic visualizations in less than 7 weeks, and you're going to be accompanied by students like you, obviously, and our amazing support that works with you for 7 days a week. But without any further ado, let's say a few hellos to all of you guys. It's really great to see you. Since this is our tradition, guys, let me know where you're from. So as you already know, we're going to be talking about fog. A lot of you DM'd us about this and you wanted to know a little bit more. So yes, we're going to be working with our scenes, and yes, we're going to see all of this step-by-step setup. So where do you want to start? Would you like to know how can we make it, or would you just like me to pretend that we can do that in Photoshop? Because a lot of times when somebody's going to tell you that you should create fog, you will probably think that it's going to be best to create this in Photoshop. And well, to some extent maybe, but you're never going to have full control. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm obviously not going to spend too much time on drawing all of that, but you typically would have to create some kind of lines that would pretend to be white, then add a few additional noise levels to it, and that's never going to look good. But what we really are after is effects like this, where you can see all of the God rays, and we want to be able to work with realistic smoke in our scenes, not just some kind of cutouts or just pasted in Photoshop elements, which is going to be a good way of saving a little bit of time. But I think that whenever we talk about any kind of work like this, we first need to understand why and where should we be adding it, because sometimes it's not going to be even worth it. So hello, Austria, Russia, Lebanon, okay, and Egypt, and Georgia. What makes the atmospheric effects look more realistic, and what makes mistakes do people make that make them look fake? Again, you've got some good questions. I remember you. So that's a very nice question to begin with. So first thing first, what makes those atmospheric effects look realistic? First of all, the amount of it, and let's say position, because if the position is going to allow some object to submerge in them and the light to really let's say wrap around those objects, it's going to be a little bit easier. So here you can see that we've got a nice reference image from one of our students. Again, we're going to be working mostly with our students' scenes. You thought that that's a picture, right? I mean, that's a name and that's a photo. Fortunately, that's actually a render created by one of our students. First thing first, what we can see here is that whenever we want some kind of volumetric effects, we want them to work with our environment, because this kind of lighting is going to, let's say this kind of effect is going to have tremendous amount of effect on your lighting. It is going to be quite important for us that you take that into consideration. It also enhances the levels, or let's say the feeling of depth in your scene, because it will literally cut out the trees that will be in the background, and it will really nicely highlight those objects that are in the foreground. So fog is going to build up over time, and we're going to see how good it is because it really allows us to focus on what's important in our pictures. Here you can see again just the white render, so we are on the same page and everybody understands that this effect is going to not only work with some kind of rays, or it's going to create fog that's going to give us a few levels. What it also does, or what it should do, is it should also work with all the light, scattering it around, so it's going to create this beautiful bloom effect around all of the elements of your lighting, and this is something that is going to be absolutely amazing to work with. I don't know if you remember a movie called Blade Runner. I was working on one of the projects for my client, and I decided to add just the notch of that fog, and I kind of liked it. So I started experimenting with it to create different moods. But again, it didn't yet really felt really good. So what I decided to do is test if the light alone is responsible for it, or can I really do something about it? And it turns out that I can do something about it. I can introduce a little bit of volumetrics in order to get better mood. And this also opens up doors to absolutely amazing things where you can just combine everything you know about the volumetrics to make them look a little bit more realistic. And in the end, we're going to have something that's going to allow us to, again, create something that you may really be proud of. Cyprus, Canada. Hello, Boris. It's really nice to see you. David Poya. Okay, guys, there's a lot of you here. So, fog, right? Let's get back on the topic. So, first, let's see into the scene. It's a fairly simple scene that's going to, the original version was created by our student, and you can see it here. I had to alter it a little bit to give it the effect because I believe that this image is beautiful, and thanks to Paulina, we can show you something more. So first thing first, how do we make this type of effect? It is always going to be tied to either good textures, which is going to be very hard, and some kind of volumetrics, which is the harder part. You also need to make sure that your objects are going to be easily, let's say, traceable. So I don't want my fog to be all around the place. We are dealing with a pool here. So what I wanted to make sure is that not only my fog is going to be limited to the area closer to the pool, because there's no reason for me to have any fog in this area, but I really want to create this vibe where you can see that everything or all of this foggy or smoky steam is coming from this area. So we have to really work with something that's going to allow us to not only introduce this smoke, but well, also limited. First, let's jump into a clear scene that, or let's say a smaller scene that's going to allow us to just walk you through the effect or its basics. So you can see that this effect is quite nice, and again, let's just dive into it and try to set it up real fast. Okay, this is not going to be necessary. All of those leaves are also unnecessary, so we're just going to look into it. What we're dealing with is Corona volume material. It's a very simplistic one, so we're going to try to set it up from the beginning. So where do we really use a material like that? We probably will be creating some kind of objects that will be our fog carriers, but not a lot of people really know what not a lot of people knows is that you can actually add your fog as a volume effect for your sky. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So we can just clear this out because we're going to be adding the volume material. We could just use the one that's going to be part of the sky itself, but that's not going to give us the God rays that we're after. So how about we go to Corona, materials, Corona, and jump into volume material. That's pretty much going to be the basics for it. Okay, guys, tell me, where would you use your fog once you actually master it? what kind of scenes you think really should have it. Because we're going to show you a few things that I believe are going to be quite useful. Maybe I'm going to be able to find a video from a club that I made. It's a little bit creepy, I would say, but regardless, it was fun to make. Yes, Corona volume material. It's a very simple material that at its default setting is going to give us absolutely no effect. Why? Because, well, we need to dive into absorption first. Absorption is going to literally absorb the light. So we're going to be losing some amount of light, and you can really think about the amount as the percentage, because you can see that this white line is not only going to have 256 points from 0 to 55, but it's also going to be possible to represent this as a percentage. So we're not going to be changing it right now, but what we need to understand is that if the light is going to travel, oh, I forgot to plug it in, right, actually. So if our light is going to travel the right amount of, well, if it's going to travel the right amount, it is going to be pretty much lost on us at some point. So we need to make sure that our volume material, which is now working for some reason, so I've actually copied it. So once we have it, we need to understand that right now, after traveling 1 centimeter, we're losing almost half of our light. So we need to make sure that this distance is going to be big enough for our absorption not to really absorb all of the light, so the sunlight can actually reach us in this point. So what's happening right now is that we're pretty much going to absorb most of the light based on this setup. But what I really want to make sure, hi, will you save this video on your channel? Well, we're going to find out about that. So if you want this to be saved, it's probably going to be, but please make sure to also like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us grow, and this kind of topics are, well, let's say hard to make for, and I would love to have a little bit of compensation from you in the form of a few likes, shares, because it really helps us beat the algorithm, and believe me, that really gives us a boost of motivation. So going back to our absorption, if we're going to lower this value, we're going to lose more light and it's going to be lost quicker. So we've got our scattering. Scattering is going to break our light into additional particles. So pretty much we're going to see that our sky or our scene becomes a little bit milkier. So long story short, we're going to produce this effect that by default is going to pretty much look like some kind of natural disaster just happened and we're really in trouble right now. So how do we make it look good? First thing we can do is increase the amount of absorption, or the, let's say, distance that the light needs to travel. You can pretty much set up whatever in your absorption and just work with the distance, because I found it to be a little bit easier. So let's just type in something around 5,000 centimeters in this case. So it's going to be more or less, well, the weather is going to allow us to breathe. And now what's going to be super important here is that we work mostly with our scattering value. So here you've got the directionality. This value is going to be responsible for the God ray effect that we all know really well. If we're going to go for negative values, what's going to happen is that we're going to see a little bit more of this effect in, let's say, in the area where the light really is. So it's going to be a bit stronger there, and it's going to produce that strong sheen in the area where the light really is. So it is going to be easier for us to really see that some of the light is gathering extra in this area, but it's not going to travel any further. So it's going to create a halo effect around the light source. You can see it better if we move around our sun a little bit and actually make it shine even stronger into our face. You can see that, yes, the effect is happening, but it's super subtle because of the, again, amount of absorption. So we're going to have to really go higher to see a little bit of that effect. But what's going to be also a plus here is that we can reverse this and go to the positive values. Positive values are going to do the opposite. They will pretty much allow the light to travel freely, and it's not going to be as broken as it was a second ago. So this pretty much brings us to the best part of our idea, or let's say this effect, where just by placing this light source in, let's say, in, I would say, a smart way, we're going to produce this effect. But what's going to be, again, very disappointing is that if we're going to have too much light from all around the scene, we're not going to see a lot of this effect, even if our absorption is going to be very strong, because in this case, what's happening is this directionality is mostly going to be working with the light that directly reaches our camera. So you definitely want to make sure that at least a glimpse of your light source is going to be visible if you want to see this effect at all. So it is going to be important for us to keep those small rules in mind whenever we will be moving on into our scene. We could use the same thing in this case. So we can create this effect based on just volume material, and that's exactly what we can do here. So I'm going to just jump in, add the volume material, and start rendering. So by adding this material to the box that you've just saw, well, nothing is going to happen because, again, we have to set it up real quick. So let's go for a little bit of absorption. So we're going to absorb some of that light, and we need to add a little bit of our scattering. So scattering is going to have a nice milky color, and we're pretty much there. But this is not the effect we were talking about in the beginning, because the fog is overwhelming, it's very uniform, and there's no real, let's say, fluffiness to it. We want to be able to create it or control it a little bit better. As I mentioned, I don't want any fog in this area. I don't need it at the ceiling. So how do we do that? Because our volume material added to a box like this works better. Quick tip for you guys: whenever you will be creating this effect based on a box, never put your camera inside of the volume box, because otherwise it's not going to work. And I'm going to show you that in a second. So now we're going to move on to the second part of our today's webinar. Okay, so guys, meanwhile, if you have any questions to me, please make sure to ask them right away. I will be thrilled to answer a few questions just so we can have a little bit more conversation. Sure, thank you. Hello from Ghana. Ghana, wow, that's also always nice to hear that too. Well, yeah, I say this each time when we have our webinar, that it's amazing that we reach all the corners of the world, but it really blows my mind that somebody in Ghana, somebody in India, France is just sitting there and watching me talk about fog in 3ds Max. That's just amazing, and I love it. So thank you very much for your amazing support. About support, did you hear about VizAcademy support? Yes, so if you sign up to our training, you're going to have access to our online full support, which means that you're going to be able to chat with our seasoned professional 3D designers and architects for a little bit of assistance in terms of 3ds Max. So that's a quick plug right there. But now let's make this same effect, but a little bit more complicated. Hello, I live the live stopped here from some reason. I don't know if that's the case with anybody else. It works now. Thank you for the effort. Thank you, Hassan. I really appreciate you telling me that, because obviously if anything would be wrong, I would prefer to be informed. Algeria, that's also amazing. So how much does this effect affect render speed? That's a good question, because unfortunately, it is going to affect the render speed. By my metrics, I can say that a very subtle effect is going to have little to no effect. But if we're going to have super dense clouds like this, that's when this effect is going to be a little bit harder to work with. So why this volume effect is so good, and why do we want to be able to create it? First of all, as I said, the realism is going to be related to the fact that this is actually volume, and it's going to wrap around our objects and it's going to interact with them. There's going to be shadow on the smoke, there's going to be a little bit of the fog itself or smoke should have impact on your scene. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of that. Italy, Ivory Coast, nice. That's so cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks for sharing. I'm from Vietnam, and I'm very excited to learn from your video. Really nice to hear that. Brazil, okay, guys. So meanwhile, if you have any questions regarding 3ds Max, also go ahead and ask them. Can volumetrics only be contained in a simple box, or can it be any simple shape? Again, thank you, Northwest. Your questions are absolutely amazing. So before we really make it, let's go ahead and just turn this teapot into a smoky teapot. So yes, we can pretty much turn anything into smoke with the right settings. So thank you for that. It's really great to have you in our audience. You're asking pretty nice questions. Hi Mike, could the volumetric effect be used with a daylight system? Again, Ryani, thank you for joining. Yes, it can be used with daylight system, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. You can see that right now I'm using Corona Sky and Corona Sun to lit this scene. What's going to be a quick, or let's say funny thing to learn, is that all the newest clouds in Corona are pretty much running the same volumetrics algorithm that this setup does. I mean, it's basically optimized at its core, but it's essentially the same idea. But let's go ahead and actually learn how to set up this smoky thing. So if I'm going to delete everything that I've set up earlier, this is what we're getting. It's going to be exactly the same volume or the same smoke that we've seen a minute ago. Yeah, so this slice of cheese right now is going to be probably not enough for our effect. And as you noticed, we had a little bit more of that smoke on the ground and a little bit less of it at the top. So how do we get that? I'm going to introduce some of you, and some of you are already acquainted with one of my favorite tools in Corona, and that is Corona Distance Map. So Corona Distance Map is going to be quite simple. We pretty much tell this map, hey, you know what? I really don't like this object, or I love it too much and I want you to be interacting with it. Yeah, it's pretty simple to set up. So we're going to select our rectangle that makes up our ground. In your scene, when you will be setting up something bigger, you want to select your ground, you want to select your house, you want to select something that, well, pretty much will be interacting with this effect on its own. So what I'm going to do is only add this rectangle that represents my ground. So, okay, and now if we have this, what we're going to have in the first place is we're going to add this into our absorption. So if I'm going to do this exact move, it's going to quickly change my cheese into a tile. Yes, so this also brings us to another very important thing. Which I've forgotten to tell you about. So if anybody's going to be taking notes, this one is hugely important. So please make sure that you're going to take this and pretty much write it down in the red letters. Whenever you will be working with your smoke or any kind of, well, let's say volumetrics based on procedural maps, you always need to change the mapping, because by default it's going to be on surface, and on surface doesn't look good. On top of that, you're also going to need to change the step size, because by default it is going to be set to 1. The difference between 1 and 50 is going to be quite easy to understand. 1 means that the voxels, or small boxes that make up our volumetrics, are going to be way denser and smaller. But at cost of a lot of performance. So if we want this to be super interactive, we want to set up at least 50, but preferably around 100 centimeters, depending on the quality you're going for. In my case, 100 or even 1000 works for larger scenes, but if it's interior, you should be moving around 50 or lower. But please remember that you want to stop your rendering before changing this value to lower, because it is going to have impact on how your scene behaves. So what does this material, or what does this effect do? It allows us to pretty much allow our slice of cheese to be bigger and smaller at the same time by simply changing the distance from our rectangle. You can also reverse this effect if you want to create something extra. So we can just swap those colors and we're going to pretty much have a really weird sandwich, which again is going to allow us to determine where we're going to have our fog. For some reason, it didn't get the memo that it should have a white color on the top. So we're just going to continue. Okay, so pretty much the setup is simple, but it still doesn't look anywhere near interesting. So how about we introduce another map? And that map is going to be pretty much just a smoke. I mean, it's just going to be smoke map. So it's a procedural map that's part of 3ds Max for ages. I remember first tutorials that I was following, smoke was heavily used for planet creation or, well, explosion effect, all of that. So we're just going to plug in our smoke, but you may want to keep in mind that 0 and 255 values are not going to be by default. I want to make it super clear that we're going to be working with a somewhat grayish color and somewhat blackish, but preferably just black. So this means that we're going to have our distance scaled up, let's say, affected by this value. This way we're going to pretty much have our fluffy clouds. Okay, those are way too thick for me, so we're just going to introduce a little bit more distance into our volume material, and that way this smoke or this fog is going to be a little bit easier to work with, and we're going to actually see something through it. And again, by increasing a little bit of this distance, we're going to allow this smoke to grow. And there are 3 things that I absolutely love about this setup. First of all, we can at any time change the scale of our smoke, and it's going to be super fast and easy to do. So whenever you want nice fluffy effect, yeah, well, 3ds Max has got you. But if you want to, you can even make it super cool by changing one of the colors into another smoke map. So if we introduce this map into our smoke 1 or smoke 2, what we're going to have is even fluffier or a little bit more randomized smoke. So you can see that it adds one extra level of that, I would say, realism. So we're going to be able to just set up a little bit more, more absorption. So there's a lot going on. Hi, bro. I'm in the industry since 18. I'm 40 years and I'm still learning. You are great. Thank you, Ginger 3D. It's really nice to hear that even professionals can still learn something. So there's some hope for me, I guess. Okay, so now we've got our basic setup. We're going to be controlling it using our absorption and the distance scale. But the 2 things that I really love is that this is procedural. So we can make it bigger if we want to. And if we want to introduce a few additional effects, we can even stretch it. So it's going to look like a running pattern, or let's say a little bit like fog on a wind with wind. So yeah, it's a mix, right? The last thing, or last property that I really want to highlight right now is that we're going to be able to make this nice smoke look even nicer or more realistic by, well, let's say, introduce a little bit more of our absorption, something around 1000. And now with our distance, we're going to be able to also do a bit of a trick. Because if I'm going to lower this value here, I can also use the lower, or let's say near value. So if I'm going to increase the near value, what's going to happen is I'm going to get super thick fog at the bottom, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of smoke in the air. So it is going to be quite a nice idea if you want to create a very, let's say, moody fog for your swimming pool. Guys, that's exactly what we're going for. So we're going to do it just that. And as I said, we're going to be able to control both of those effects just like that if we just want to. And yes, if you're going to turn on your clouds, that's pretty much going to look like this. And I'm going to prove it to you by deleting my ground and introducing another player into our setup. So there's no ground right now, so the Corona distance is going crazy and just asking for some kind of distance object. So we're going to give it to it by simply adding this this sphere. And look at that, we're now producing clouds in 3ds Max without any kind of cost. So remember those clouds in a gallery? Well, that's one of those effects that you can now play around with, because this is going to be, as I mentioned, procedural. So you're pretty much good to go. And if your sky cloud ship is going to be going through some kind of turbulence, this is how you can make it. But this is not related to what we want. Let's just go back to our scene finally and set it up together. So we're going to have a little bit more fun now. The whole setup for the lighting is quite simple. I didn't do any mega tricks for it, but as I mentioned previously, because this fog is going to produce a lot of, let's say, unnecessary effect at the top, I decided that I'm going to be using this technique that I just shown you, because I don't want this fog to make my scene look like it's pretty much in the middle of a fire. So let's just make sure that we apply this material, and we're going to copy some of my settings. So the settings are exactly the same as we just saw. So here we've got magic smoke, which is set up to grayish color and grayish air color. So it's pretty much the same thing, but one thing that was important here was this distance map, and we're distancing ourselves from the pool. So how about we just simply copy this, because there's no need for us to remake it for the third time. So let's just apply this into our absorption, and now we're going to see the difference between the effect that we have control over and the effect that we don't have control over. So as I mentioned, we're going to remove a lot of weight from the ceiling. That way, a lot of this effect is going to really reside on closer to the ground. And thanks to the fact that now we can add a little bit of near value, we're also going to be able to add a little bit of that denser smoke just on and closer to the ground. So again, it's going to be something that I believe everybody's going to be happy with, because yes, it's again something that everybody's going to be able to use in their scenes whenever you want to produce extra mood. Another tool that's going to be super helpful with this is obviously Corona Light Mix. So once you set up your smoke in the scene, you want to make sure that you also follow those three things that I did. So first, we're going to click on set up our Corona Light Mix. So it's super simple. We're just going to generate a new one, and you can see that by default, it wasn't as moody. So what did we do? First of all, I made sure that my environment light is not going to be as strong. So we're just going to introduce some kind of extra color, so it's going to have more impact. Also, in my case, I'm not going to be using as much of it, so we're just lowering the amount, because now a lot of that effect, or the way of the effect, is going to be shifted towards our main light source. So this main light source is obviously our sun, but all other lights are going to be complementary. So you want to keep that in mind, that all of your lights are going to play a role. So we're just going to change the color, and we can just make it a little bit weaker, stronger if we need to, and we now need to add the animation effect or just add the animation itself. So a lot of times when you will be rendering, you probably want to render out your stuff in frames. But I think that whenever we will be producing our shorts or any kind of videos, you just want to make sure that the setup is super simple and easy to read for everybody. What I did for my smoke specifically, and that really allowed me to call it magic, is animate the phase. So phase pretty much means that, well, let's say moment or a life part of the light. It changes the moment at which we're looking at our smoke. So it's pretty much going to add the organic lifelike looks to it. You want to make sure that this part, or let's say our phase, is not going to be changed too fast. So we just click on our auto key, go to phase and type in some small value. So once we play our animation, it is going to slowly change from 1 to 2, so it's not going to even be a big impact. But for our viewers, when more than one object is going to be moving, it's going to be a tremendous impact overall. So my son, again, in this case, is moving, just shifting a little bit. I had to make sure that this effect is going to be subtle, because I don't like flashy things. I like to make sure that everything is going to be self-explanatory. If it's fog, if it's volume effect, this is something that we're going to be focusing our most attention on. And in the end, all of those things combined allow us to create beautiful effects. Any questions, guys? Do you want me to go over any of the topics that we just discussed, or are you satisfied with what we've got? Okay, so minimize this and let's just stop this rendering for a second. Let's switch to our perspective. I totally forgot that we're going to be working with interactive render light mix, so it's going to be the best solution for us, because we're adding that mode here. Did I just move my camera? I might have done that, so I apologize in advance. So let's just add this in. Yeah, so I fixed it. Hello guys, I'm a little bit late, but I'm glad to attend your webinar. I'm sure it will be very helpful. Panagiotis, welcome. I remember you. How you been? Okay, so Mike, can you make a video for interior with a small opening or no opening, how to do the lighting for that scene? Yeah, we can do that. By the way, that really brings us to another topic that I want to hint towards you, or let's say give you a little bit of a taste of what we will be talking about quite soon. So you may saw that on our Instagram, but if you haven't, this is what I wanted to share with you today. So which one was it? Okay, so this is the video. Did you know that we're planning on making another video, the type of from zero to hero? What it means is we're going to start with just the simplest plane, and we're going to build this whole scene from scratch. We're going to be using all the techniques that we've shown in previous webinars. So it's going to be just a quick guide or walkthrough, really. You're going to learn how to model that restaurant, how to add materials to it, and how to build the lighting. And in the end, in under an hour, or in 2 parts, we're going to create that restaurant and render it together. So we're going to have something nice to show for. So this is pretty much it for today, but I can see that we've got a few more questions coming in. Okay, so can we import images plain as in Maya? We can import we can import all images. Pretty much whatever Maya can do, 3ds Max can do it better. Most likely it's going to just have the same tools, or even a little bit more advanced. Maya wins only in one case, and that's pretty much game rigging for, well, the gaming industry, but this is not something we're after here. We're after ArcViz, so 3ds Max forever in my heart. Now, do you have any recommendations for tutorials that explain the more basic concepts of this? What exactly would you like to know? Because to be honest, it's a very simple concept. We've got pretty much the basics. Let's say we went through the basics in this simple video here, or sorry, in this part here. So to walk you through once again, absorption is going to determine how fast we're going to be losing our light. So it pretty much tells us how far the light is going to travel through some kind of object or medium before it will get pretty much obliterated. And the obliteration is going to pretty much mean that we can either get that we can lose that light, or we can switch it into something else, because scattering is going to pretty much break our light rays into different light rays by filtering out whatever absorption took from it. And it's going to pretty much change it into a different medium. So long story short, we're going to see colors in our fog. Because what I didn't really talk about or didn't show you yet is that whatever color we add to our fog, and okay, I need to go one step back. Whatever color we add to our scattering, we're also going to change our fog color into that. So that's pretty much going to be it. Whatever color we set up for our absorption, that color is going to be filtered. So we can take away a little bit of blue color. So that way, if we're going to be working with water, it's going to, red color. If we take away red color from water, everything is going to be a little bit bluish. So we're going to have more realistic effect if something is going to be submerged. And in the end, it's all about just those two values. We also have the single bounce that really gives us almost nothing. It pretty much speeds up the rendering. So if this effect is not going to be something that you pay attention to, that's pretty much what you click. Next, we've got emission, but emission is pretty much the reverse of absorption because it produces light at the distance. If we set up some small value, it's going to look ridiculous. If we set up values that are too big, we're going to see nothing. This is pretty much good for a nice foggy effect if you don't want to necessarily create any kind of specific environment, but I don't think it's that useful in most of the cases. And whenever you will be using any kind of maps, you just use inside volume and make sure to go through the step size. So honestly, going any deeper in than that is going to be probably just being a little bit over, well, that's going to be too much because you don't need to, let's say, the beauty of Corona is that you don't need to be an engineer to build something. When I was working with different rendering engines, I was always frustrated that before I can click render, I need to know that this algorithm that handles, let's say, anti-aliasing needs to be set up if my color is red. But if I'm also going to have blue color, I need to change the algorithm for the lighting from this guy to that guy because otherwise I'm going to see yellow speckles on the left side. Then you have to also set up something like the difference. You need to determine what type of rendering delivery you want because there's going to be a significant difference. If you choose the wrong one, you're going to render everything 5 times longer. And all of that nonsense is just not part of Corona and pretty much not part of our training, which is something that essentially is going to be the best idea to dive into. So if you want to learn more, make sure to visit our website. That's VizAcademy Co. UK, where you can sign up to our 7-week training, where not only you're going to learn how to use 3ds Max and how to render in Corona, but you're also going to have access to people just like you that with a little bit of ambition, and also you're going to have access to our online 7-day support that will help you understand all the topics related to 3ds Max. I think that this is quite awesome, so remember to check out our website. I would say that for now, this would be one of those things, one of those moments where we can pretty much end our webinar, but let's see. Do we have any extra questions? Okay, thank you. This video on the channel, always been a fan of your work and so want to learn. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Hey, great work. How can we improve the texture looking and add like a matte look in it? So if you want a matte look, Ahmed, this for the most part you're going to definitely require a higher resolution textures. If your question is related to smoke, you need to add more iterations, so it's going to be deeper. But if it's about regular textures, typically more matte look needs a little bit more roughness, so it's going to create that sheen all around the texture. But in the end, all is going to really be burdened, or the most important part of your texture is actually using high quality textures that are provided by some kind of company that knows what they're doing. And that's one of the things that we also share with our students, because we want them to start working with good ingredients. Just imagine that you're working at the kitchen and somebody orders a lasagna. If you're only going to be using low quality ingredients, even if you are really good, it's going to be hard to make something tasty. And even if it's going to be tasty, it's not going to be well done. So that's going to be definitely best to invest a little bit of time into looking for good textures. Maybe basic of materials is what I need. Maybe that's what you need. So Northwest, I must really recommend you to check out our offer, because I believe that you might benefit from it. So you're invited to join our training. What do you prefer to achieve realism, V-Ray or Corona? There's no real difference between those two, but as I mentioned a little bit earlier, V-Ray typically is going to be a little bit more complicated. Although yes, V-Ray can be faster at some fields, I have to admit this. Unfortunately, setting it up is still a huge pain. And what I love about Corona, it's just this. It has few buttons, it's simple. Call me stupid, but I prefer to have everything in a small portion, just the basics, just stuff that is necessary for me. And when it comes to V-Ray, it has so many things that are just not important for my work that I just refuse to even touch it, because I get a little bit overwhelmed with all of that. Not because it's too hard, but it's unnecessarily complicated. As I said, you have to know the algorithm of that guy by name, or you need to be an engineer in computer graphics before you can render. And there are billions of tutorials on how to optimize a scene before you render it. And you know how to optimize a scene in the Corona? You turn it on, you check what noise level you want, and you click render. That's all you do. That's why I love it. Okay, I have a question, of course. If we buy the course, do we get videos from your tutors, or we are going to be live with them? Thanks. So you're going to have an option to have a live chat with them. Also, you're going to get pre-recorded videos created by our team, and also you're going to have live webinars, a little bit similar to this one, but way more complicated, or let's say we go way deeper into some knowledge in there. So hush hush, there's a lot of nice stuff that we're not sharing on YouTube, because you know there has to be some value in our training after all. Thank you, buddy. Thank you, buddy. Because it's easy to lit the scene with big openings, but with small opening and no opening lighting, the scene with artificial lighting scene does not look photorealistic. So it all depends on what you want to do. If you are working with a scene that is not going to allow you to lit it properly, I would recommend you to go back to the references, because you can see that in this area we don't have a lot of light, but in order to make it realistic, you need to make sure that you first work with good level of good quality models, then you set up your materials, and in the end it's not going to be the lighting itself, because the light is going to have, yes, a lot of impact on it, but it's all about building the mood. Sometimes even introducing a little bit of volumetrics is going to be a nice cheat to it, because you can spread a little bit more light absolutely for free this way, because it's just going to be spreading left and right. And it also works quite nice in scenarios where you just don't have enough light, or you want to produce or focus a little bit of attention in some areas that deserve it. Thanks a lot. You're always a great help. Thank you. That's really nice to read. Mike, because it's easy to like. Okay, we just answered it. So we're going to talk about the restaurant next time, and we're going to have a very limited lighting there. So Asim, I recommend you to visit our YouTube channel the next time when we will be creating a new videos for you. So once again, I'm going to show you this video, and this is pretty much it for today. Thank you very much. See you next time. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, because it really helps us beat the algorithm. We just want to make sure that we reach as many of you as possible. So once again, thank you for your attention, and see you next time. Bye bye.